Welcome, dear viewer, to the United States of Europe. This week with two guests in the studio, Sophia Kornienko and Victoria Maso from Spain, to talk about the freedom of the press. And as every week, hosted by me, Greg Shapiro, the American Netherlander. Welcome back. We are giving the EU the respect they deserve by making fun of them just like everybody else. And if you like what you see, please let us know you're out there. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, share the link if you would, and use the hashtag GSUSE, and that will help let us know you're out there as well. This week, as promised, we have two guests in the studio to talk about press freedom from two different angles. We have, Sophia Kornienko, who is representing many different countries, from Estonia to Russia to the Netherlands, and Victoria Maso, coming directly from Spain.
Yeah.
So welcome, folks. And we have two specific perspectives on press freedom. Where is press freedom the best, according to Reporters Without Borders? In Spain or in, let's say, Ukraine?
Oh, well.
Well, the situation in Ukraine is very different from the Russian situation.
Yeah.
And I'm here to talk about the Russian situation, so I wouldn't put them on the same level.
Okay.
And between them, obviously, in Spain. I think so.
And
are we positive about the condition in Spain as compared to Russia or even Estonia, for that matter, or positive, negative?
I think, fortunately, it's a positive. We have a positive situation.
Well, we're going to put things in perspective even more in just a moment, but hang in there. We have an interview coming up. But first, let's check in with the news from this week. Another Euro summit, another anti-austerity protest, but this time with fire. While the European Central Bank insists that EU countries slash their budgets, they built themselves a sparkling new headquarters in Frankfurt worth 1.2 billion euros. Now, you'd think that if you're going to spend that much money on yourself, you might as well invest in a little something, for some other people, like the eventual protesters. Say a truckload of Apple Watches for everyone. Sure, they're a little bulky, but they might have taken a bit of the edge off of this. Thousands of euros in damage after the protests, and the head of the ECB, Mario Draghi, he was like, put it on my tab. Mario Draghi, aka Super Mario, hey, he did save the euro once, so let's try to see things from his perspective. Obviously, the old headquarters were not big enough for one man, but really, Super Mario, couldn't you have just changed the logo on the sign outside? So yes, of course, there were protests, but the ECB seemed genuinely surprised, issuing a statement that due to the unexpected protests, the inauguration ceremonies would have to be scaled back. But, as according to the statement, they insisted that the institution was fully operational, a phrase that really makes people only think of one thing and one movie in particular, the Empire in Star Wars. Just the metaphor we were looking for, ECB, as in our new headquarters are fully operational. The ECB protests in Frankfurt are, of course, in addition to last month's austerity riots at the EU Commission in Brussels, and next month, protesters promise that the third member of the Troika, the IMF, will be targeted just so nobody feels left out. Although they're unclear if they should be rioting in Paris or Brussels or apparently Frankfurt. We're just, good work, IMF, throwing them off the scent. And while most protesters found their way successfully to the ECB headquarters in Frankfurt am Main, there are always a few protesters who show up to the wrong Frankfurt am Oder in the east of Germany, but apparently those protests were quite peaceful. In business news, Dutch lighting business Philips has announced that it is selling off its lighting business. Instead of Philips, the company will now simply be called F. And in other sell-off news, UK Prime Minister David Cameron announced that Britain is selling off Britain's share of the Eurostar service. Next, the UK plans to detach itself from Europe completely and sail the island further out, maybe somewhere closer to Iceland. In other news, last week, the solar eclipse in Europe was spectacular from certain points, but Northern Europe had its own special protective eyewear. And in fact, with its reliance on solar energy, Germany issued warnings that the solar eclipse might cause some power disruptions, but luckily, German homes and businesses were largely unaffected. The Germans simply replaced solar power with their collective white-hot rage against Greece. The European Council met in Brussels last week to discuss the Ukraine and Libya, but actually ended up just talking more about Greece. Asked if she was optimistic about progress with Greece, here's what Angela Merkel had to say.
On Greece is that we don't expect a solution or a breakthrough. That's not the purpose here.
Of course, it's difficult for Germany to see clearly on the issue of Greece, especially when the Greek finance minister, Yanis Varoufakis, was caught on tape giving Germany der Mittelfinger.
And stick the finger to Germany and say, well, you can now solve this problem by yourself.
Did he do the stink finger or no? Varoufakis says the tape is a fake, but that didn't stop the German media from reporting it as fact and then going collectively berserk. German media and nationalistic outrage, always a great combination. In fact, the video was faked by none other than satirical German TV show Neo Magazin Royal and Jan Bommermann. Good job, guys. But here's how they did it.
Für Varoufakis, Szene 15, Take 12.
Es waren schon sehr aufwendige Dreharbeiten und ich musste 2 Tage lang immer so machen. Immer so.
Also hier kann man zum Beispiel sehen, die können die Hand einfach frei.
Now, apparently, Bommermann's goal was not to fake the video, but to prove how easy it would be to fake the video. Well, Varoufakis was not faking when he said,
And that, the German people deserve better media.
to be fair, the Greek people deserve better media as well. So let's take a look at this supposedly real video from Angela Merkel.
Hey, Yanis, I got your middle finger right here. Why don't you take your cheating ass Tsipras and stop trying to fuck us?
And stay tuned. This week we discuss the role of media in the grand experiment called the European Union. But first, quickly, let's check in with David Duff, who is this week giving us the perspective from the headlines in Sweden.
The headlines.
David Duff, the itinerant Irishman. Now, this week you're reporting from Malmo in Sweden. What's going on in the headlines there?
Yes, hello. To be honest, Sweden being Sweden, it's been another pretty boring week. There's been quite little happening. But what has happened is that Copenhagen wants to make Malmo part of Denmark again. They want to call it Greater Copenhagen.
Wow, where does that come from?
Oh, well, southern Sweden, Skåne, used to actually be part of Denmark. And the Swedes conquered it back in the 16th century, and they made a part of Sweden by pretty much killing all the Danes that lived here. But nowadays, the tourist board and the industry boards in Copenhagen have decided it will be a good thing to call this whole area, this whole province of southern Sweden, call it Greater Copenhagen and see it as a suburb of Copenhagen as opposed to being a part of Sweden.
I normally think of Denmark's southern neighbor as having a traditionally expansionist policy, but so are there any chances of this actually happening?
I think it probably will happen, yeah. I think in name it's going to just become the term. It's going to be called Greater Copenhagen for industry purposes. Like, it's going to really benefit the tourism sector and also to try and lure in some companies to Copenhagen because it'll, with the population increase, including southern Sweden, it's going to make...
They might be marketing it that way already. It's interesting as well that the cities, people have more of a city identity than sometimes a national or certainly European identity. So we might check back in on this subject. But what else is going on in Sweden? Sweden is a member of the European Union, but not a member of the Euro. How's the economy doing there?
Not so great. The economy here isn't so good, depending where you're living in Sweden. In Malmo, it's not that great at the moment. There's a high unemployment rate, and there's deflation. They're having a very bad problem with deflation, the Swedish central bank. So stuff is going down in price as opposed to increasing, which is just having a knock-on effect. That's making the Swedish krona weak against the euro, which is kind of good for Swedish exports, but also kind of bad because Swedish exports tend to be of commodities like iron ore and stuff like that. Which,
or guns.
Yeah, or guns.
Which are no longer, which are now off the table. Okay, well, we'll check back in with the news from Sweden, or perhaps wherever you might be visiting next.
Yes, maybe Norway. I'll be there next week.
That would be great. Okay, yeah. David Duff, we'll see you next time. Thanks. Thank you, David. And we're back in the studio. If you're just joining us with Sophie and Victoria, and for Sophia from Victoria, thank you. And again, is there one truth in journalism? I don't know. Is her name Sophie or Sophia? I think we can be pretty objective about that. Sophia.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, see? Well, you're just hurting your own point. For people who don't know you guys, I'm going to, as always, start off with the 6 in 60. This time we'll double down, and we have 60 seconds on the clock. The first answer that pops into your head is exactly the right answer. 60 seconds. Here we go. Victoria, where did you grow up?
In Gandia.
Where's that?
Gandia is in the Mediterranean coast in Valencia. It's a small, town.
Okay.
But really touristic one.
Nice.
I'm sure that a lot of Dutch people know this area.
They probably do, yeah. The south, okay, Valencia, the coast.
Or British than live here.
Yeah, really? Wow. Okay. So, Sophia, how many languages do you speak?
I haven't counted.
Haven't counted?
But I can give an interview in about 4.
Okay, 4 is good. Let's see. Oh, Victoria.
Bye, Sophia.
How long? Yeah, Victoria. How long have you been living in Netherlands?
7 months, I think.
Okay, so a recent arrival. Well
yes,
done.
Landing.
And let's talk about journalism and movies about journalism. Sophia, do you have a favorite movie about journalism?
I don't really have the time to watch those things.
Exactly, no time.
I have 2 small children.
Oh, you have really? Okay, great. She's the mama and not the movie watcher. Okay, Victoria, a book that you're reading. Are you reading any books right now?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm reading one, but it's a really good one. Don't Think Like an Elephant.
Okay. Don't.
You can look it.
Who wrote that?
Is a sociologist.
Okay.
An American one. It's about politics.
Great. Don't think like an elephant.
Really boring.
Oh, it sounds
but interesting at the same time.
Okay, so don't think like a Republican if it's... Oh, okay, anyways. I'm going to now just go into a bit of a depth about your background, both of your backgrounds in journalism.
Well, I have to say that I'm here because, I lost my job in Spain like a lot of people there, especially journalists also. I was working in a regional public TV and radio station, but politicians one day decide to close the channel. So
and this was the Canal 9?
Canal No, yes.
Canal No, sorry.
Canal No, Canal No is in Valenciano, more or less like Catalan.
Okay.
And Canal 9, yes, in Spanish.
Okay.
So 1,500, not only journalists, technicians, and all the people there.
1,500 jobs were...
Yes. So I arrived here looking for fresh air.
We're going to talk more about how that happened in just a moment.
But that recently occurred in Russia to one of the best online publishers. They just all together with the whole team started a new project, and it's brilliant now.
Were they fired or?
Yeah, they were all fired.
So they're all made redundant, but then
it's an option. Yeah,
you were the correspondent, the Netherlands correspondent for
Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty.
Yeah.
That's an American radio station that has a huge Russian service.
Right.
It also has other services in other languages.
And
the Russian one has always been legendary. It was set up in 1946.
Of course. So it's the Cold
War. To fight
War.
Communism.
Exactly. It's. I mean, you could call it a sort of propaganda machine.
No.
From
not at all.
No. A voice of freedom and pluralistic liberty.
It's always been a place where many people on exile emigrated from the Soviet Union could find work. Very famous writers worked there.
Okay.
And it hosted such a plurality of voices from monarchists to anarchists.
And it still does. Let's talk about a phrase that you have used, which is the weaponization of the media. And you seem to be a bit of an expert on how Russia is ending up so low down on the list from Reporters Without Borders and the ranking of Russia right now. But you're saying that this is not an accident. Is that how do you know that Russia is weaponizing their media?
Well, it's not only what typically occurs in a dictatorship, because Russia is steadily moving towards becoming an Iran-like dictatorship.
Okay.
Very closed country.
I would call it a theocracy, I guess, but maybe it's
no,
the cult of
Putin. It's really in the geometrical progression that they're moving towards an abyss.
Yeah, okay.
But it's also since a few years, it's been state policy to use media as a weapon in a new type of war that Russia has actually started against the West, more or less, if we generalize. And it's called, in Russian, it's called non-linear war, to make it sound nice, but actually it's a hybrid warfare.
Hybrid, okay,
and that means that basically not only typical lethal weapons are involved. If they're involved, then it's being said that wasn't us.
Like in the Ukraine, in the
some
eastern
green men
Ukraine,
are doing it.
Sure, yeah.
But also a very, very important part of that is that the media are used as weapons.
Yeah.
And basically, it means that globalization and the freedom of speech are being used to throw as much as possible disinformation and lies into the informational field, so that there's no discussion possible anymore, so that there's so much white noise.
Okay. Before the whole firings happened at the Valencia, in Valencia, was there pressure from politicians to control the message coming out on this public broadcasting?
Yes. Well, for example, calls to the chiefs to say what news are going to appear in the news.
Okay.
First of all, which are the messages that we need to spread all the time, which are the events that we need to give coverage or not go to coverage.
So there really was a sort of dictating of the news from
yes, of course, to create a reality.
What are some of the, I don't know, let's go over to Sophia. Do you have any stories of difficulty as a journalist with getting your message out, getting your story?
Well, difficulties very mildly put. You just being killed in Russia. When I left Russia, that was when it all began to tighten. So that was actually one of the reasons why I left, because
what year was that?
2004.
Thanks.
That was just a year after Khodorkovsky, one of the main oligarchs in opposition to Putin, was put in jail. So more or less began back then.
The one who just recently got out and got out of the country and
and so at that point there were already things happening, such as for example, a colleague of mine got beaten up in broad daylight by a pro-Putin newspaper representatives
and
another Russian newspaper. Yeah. We knew perfectly well who did that before having published an article, and it was happening all the time. And there were already a couple journalists not as famous as Politkovskaya, who everybody knows in the West now, who was killed in 2006, but there were already a couple journalists assassinated.
Well, there's certainly a bravery to a lot of what journalists are doing. I always have admiration for journalists who put themselves on the front lines or who are going into Syria, for example, but now in Russia as well.
I really want to make the point of saying that I saw the direction it was taking, but no way could I predict how far it would go.
Really?
I mean, how far it now has gone is so devastating.
Okay.
The whole information field has been completely wiped out in Russia. It's impossible for any independent media to reach a wide audience.
We're creating a very sort of dark picture right now. You can try to go to alternative media or go into exile if you want to report the truth.
You ask about alternatives, and you are talking about the net, on the net. I think, for example, in our case, we are having an explosion. I don't know if we can say that.
Okay.
On the internet, a lot of magazines, new newspapers, and radio programs, TV programs.
Well, the way we consume media is just being reinvented every week. So
yes. But it's really far from traditional media in Spain. You don't need so much money. You can do what you want. It's a little. You can find there more freedom.
Okay.
And even if you're
it's less dangerous.
It's less dangerous. Yes, it's less dangerous.
And yet you were also mentioning that you have evidence of how even the Russian national media is reaching out into international forums and
I think
putting disinformation out there.
For the people watching this program, that's probably much more important to know.
Go ahead.
That if you look at the Russian budget for this year, there are cuts in everything, even defense, while Russia is actually at war.
Right.
But there's just one article where there's more money being spent this year, and that is propaganda.
What can we do to create more journalistic objectivity? And we have Reporters Without Borders already. They're working more with the UN.
Yeah, but that should be like more centralized.
So more top down or more bottom up?
No, bottom up, but more people should know about it and contribute to it so that it becomes sort of something that you always consult. Because I too often see Russia Today people on Newsyear, a primetime analytical program on Dutch TV, who they invite so to speak, to give the second opinion on things, and they're again just voicing the lies that Putin wants the world.
And I think journalists in Spain and me, of course, need to do a kind of self-criticism. I think during a lot of time we had been too obedient because we were afraid to lose our jobs in a frozen market. So we can't be so obedient,
Good point.
Because the censorship in Spain, you can find the censorship, but mostly in one way, the self-censorship. So
stop self-censoring and be more,
yes, of course.
That's great, actually, and a good note for me as a journalist as well. By the way, if we want to know more about you guys, there's a great story of Victoria who's talking for 10 hours in a row or 24 hours that you tried to avoid Valencia Television going off the air. If you want to see Victoria's video, you can do that. There's a link. And for Sophia, how can we find out more about you?
I have a website, SophiaKornienko.com.
Yeah.
And I work for a Russian language Radio Free Europe outlet that's called Svoboda, that's freedom in Russian.
Oh, of course.
.org. But also on Radio Free Europe website in English, you can read our main stories about Russia.
There we go. And thank you both for joining us. And here's to press freedom. Thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Cheers.
Cheers.